Hey you lovely lot, and welcome back to Crime Analyst YouTube channel and the Intelligence Cell. Now I want to dive back into the horrific and harrowing case of Corey Micciolo, Corey's murder. And I want to talk about Christopher Gregor's behaviour, his post-offence behaviour specifically. Now, post-offence behaviour is very important to someone like me. It can be revealing and instructive. And so I want to unravel some of the significant things that I see about Christopher Gregor. And he is currently on trial for Corey's murder. But before I get into it, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you who are watching my videos. Thank you for subscribing. It means the world to me. And even more so that you've super thanked me. So I want to say a particular big thank you to those who've super thanked me and sent donations to me. I really appreciate you supporting my work, and I appreciate you valuing what I do. I give a voice to victims, I give a voice to the voiceless, and I share my expert insight and analysis because I want to ensure that, like in a case like this, Corey's voice is heard because it wasn't heard whilst he was alive. And it does take up time to do the research and analysis, and it takes time to produce the videos, and I do that all on my own. So I appreciate those contributions so much, so thank you. Also, I just want to say, because I've heard from so many of you, I know that you find this Corey's case extremely upsetting, as do I. It is a really just harrowing case, particularly the treadmill abuse video, which I know so many of you couldn't watch, and I tried to avoid it for some time, and then I psychologically had to build up to watch it because I'm a mum of a toddler, and it's extremely upsetting. But I feel I have to bear witness to what happened to Corey, and I feel that his story must be told and light must be shone on the facts and the evidence, and the significant facts and the evidence, and the behaviour of Christopher Gregor, who is, as I say, currently on trial for Corey's murder. So I look at the facts, and the facts reveal an awful lot. And also the emotion side, what I will say is emotion is important too, because otherwise if you're too anaesthetised, then the essence of being human is missed. And this isn't just a process to me, and nor should it ever be. Yes, you have to put safeguards in to deal with the trauma, because there is vicarious trauma in these cases, and it does really affect you. So, like I said, it's an important case for me because I have to bear witness to what has happened to Corey, and he was the one that had to experience it, and that is even worse. So the least I can do is shine a light and hopefully help in the process unravel what went on, and also support Brianna, Corey's mum, and justice for Corey. So what we do know is that Brianna took Corey to hospital on April the 1st because she was very concerned about all the bruises that Corey had. He had 14 separate bruises, and it was about where they were as well. And she got home from the hospital about 1 a.m. and Corey stayed with her that night, and the hospital, well, members of staff wanted to see him again on April the 2nd, Brianna said, for a forensic interview. Now that's a very important interview, and the April 2nd date is important. Those forensic interviewers would be trained in trauma and to understand child abuse and the manipulation tactics and coercive control that perpetrators use. And it would have given Corey a chance for the first time in a safe space to say what had been happening to him and by whom, but Corey never made it to that interview. So April the 2nd date is significant here. Also, Brianna had reported 100 times to DCPP, the Department of Child Protection and Permanency, that Corey was being abused, and there was photographic evidence of that. So she attempted to get help and raised the alarm many, many times, and she also attempted to get an emergency custody order after the treadmill abuse behaviour by Gregor, but it was denied by Judge Bradshaw, and I talked about that in my previous video. This was an opportunity to prevent an escalation in behaviour and to save Corey's life, but it was denied. denied because Brianna seems to have been devalued and discredited in the process. And I will come back to that in another video, but I will talk about it in this video too. So Brianna dropped Corey off at 9 a.m. on April the 2nd. She testified that Corey was normal that morning. She also had there was a 30-second video her phone had accidentally taken. You know when you've got your phone on and sometimes you click the button and it records? Well, my toddler does that all the time with my phone. So it's a bit upside down, but you can hear Corey talking. It's not focused on anyone but the car seat. You can hear Corey talking. He's normal. Normal in the sense that he's not non-verbal, and you can hear that he is breathing okay. So that was played in court. What also has come out recently is that at 10:02, Gregor called the State Child Abuse Hotline at 10:02 a.m. on April the 2nd, and he said that Corey's mother had instructed his son to lie to doctors and say that he hit Corey and that he was being coached. He also said that Brianna was a drug addict and her sister had just got out of jail because of drugs, and the boyfriend of the maternal grandmother was a twice convicted felon. He had a lot to say, all devaluing Brianna and her family, and that's interesting because that's a consistent theme. And what he doesn't say, so the omission, is that he doesn't say that Corey was sick, which is significant. It's a significant omission. But what we know is that 3:44 p.m. is that he took Corey to hospital, and Corey at that time, and I've seen pictures of him, and I've listened to Lucy Carnevale testify, who was a nurse. He was at that time limp and non-verbal, and Lucy Carnevale said that he was a very sick little boy. And medical staff were trying to ascertain what was wrong. They gave Corey a CT scan and he had a massive seizure, and they tried to save his life. And Gregor left the room, the ER, at that point. He had told nurses not to call Corey's mother. He said that she was a drug addict and not to call her. Who does that when their son is crashing and dying in the ER? He went back into the room, and he left again at 4:36 p.m. and then he left again at 4:51 p.m. when they were trying to revive Corey. And he never went back into the room to see Corey. He never went back in. And as I've said before, Corey died surrounded by strangers, surrounded by medical staff at 5:02 p.m. 5:02 p.m. on April the 2nd. And within minutes, Brianna called Gregor 3 times and he didn't answer her call. Just think about that. He didn't answer her call. Instead, what he did was leave the hospital. His dying son, when he died, he left the hospital. Now, most parents would cling to that little boy. That's what tends to happen. But he left. And he didn't just leave the hospital, he fled the state. And I'm going to tell you more about that. And he ignored a police officer's phone call on his phone. He fled to Tennessee. And it looks like, or you could reasonably imply when you look at the geography, that he was on his way to Mexico. I don't think it's a stretch to make that assumption, but he was stopped by police, and I'm going to tell you about that stop and the body-worn camera footage. I know many of you have asked me to look at it as I break down, like I did with Gabby Petito's case, when Merv City Police stopped Gabby's white van and spoke to Brian Laundrie and Gabby, and I analysed that. It's a lot of what my work is about, is deconstructing and analysing things minute by minute. It's painstaking work, but the devil's really in the detail. So I will tell you about that in a minute. Less than an hour after him leaving the hospital, at 6:10 p.m, Gregor uses his phone to search, this was the search, can your phone be tracked in airplane mode? And can my car be tracked? And then he put his phone in airplane mode. So just think about these behaviours, because when you think about behaviours and the norm, you know, yes, these are very traumatic circumstances, but what most parents will want to do is be with their child, and sometimes it's very difficult to get them away from their child when something like this happens. But here he is leaving the hospital, but also leaving the state. And he is searching on his phone about his phone and car being tracked. Consciousness of guilt. And I want to tell you more about his phone searches because I think they reveal a lot. So I want to go through what Sergeant Coles testified to. So this is about the digital evidence that was recovered from his phone and from his searches. And Sergeant Coles was a digital forensic investigator from the High-Tech Crime Unit, and he testified to these searches. So I'm going to go to March 25, first of all. March the 25th, 2021, at 9:36 p.m, he searched, will red marks turn into bruises? March 25th, so that's after the treadmill abuse. On April the 1st, at 8:43 p.m, he searched for the Neptune non-emergency police, and also at 8:49 the Jersey Shore Medical Centre. So that's the evening. That's when Brianna is with Corey, and he knew that Corey was seeing doctors. Then on April the 2nd, his web history showed at 3:08 p.m, lost consciousness. Let me get this right. Lost consciousness, sleep, and nauseous. Okay, at 3:08. Now we know he arrived at the hospital at 3:44 p.m, so he's not rushing Corey to the hospital at 3:08. He's doing searches on his phone. Then on April the 2nd at 6:10, I've told you about these searches at 6:10 p.m. Can your phone be tracked in airplane mode? Can my car be tracked? And then his car's in airplane mode. So he's Googling these things. April the 3rd at 3:14 p.m, he searched, what causes a rise in blood sugar in white blood cells? At 3:35 p.m, could internal bleeding raise your blood sugar levels? At 3:55 p.m, how does gastrointestinal bleeding happen? 4:28 p.m, how does gastrointestinal bleeding, how pong to die, P-O-N-G, so that's most likely long to die. 6:55 p.m, can a GI bleed be slow? Then after that, there's a search on McGee Tyson Airport. Then at 9:58 a.m. on April the 4th, he searched, there was a murder determined from an autopsy, how long to file charges? And at 10:21 a.m, how long after an autopsy to file charges get filed? These searches are hugely significant. Searching about injuries and cars being tracked and phones being tracked, and more significantly on April the 4th, there was a murder determined from an autopsy, how long to file charges. No one was talking about murder. Remember, he said this was natural causes, so why is he searching about murder and autopsies and charges? This shows a consciousness of guilt. And also, importantly, Sergeant Coles was asked to look at message history between Brianna and Gregor. And what he saw on Gregor's phone in terms of text messages was 0 text messages, 0. On Brianna's phone, he saw 3,466 text messages, which was ostensibly 888 pages of text between them. And he looked to see whether Brianna's phone number had been blocked by his phone, and it hadn't been. And he looked to see the settings, and he saw the messages would be retained forever, but the user could delete those messages. And he opined that Gregor deleted the messages between him and Brianna. He cannot say when, but he deleted those messages. Again, all evidence, in my opinion, of consciousness of guilt. He's thinking about what to do, what to say, evidence, and that's really significant. And he's deleting evidence. He's manipulating evidence. If you're innocent, you don't have to do that. Brianna's phone had all those messages on there, but remember, he called the child abuse hotline to say Brianna was coaching. And let me just tell you, it's very difficult to coach a child because children just tell you whatever's on their minds. They don't and cannot stick to a false narrative. So a lot of abusers will claim that children have been coached, but it's extremely difficult to coach a child to consistently say the same thing, particularly about something that is false and never happened. Okay, so the digital evidence is extremely important for me. He's deleting those messages, putting the phone in airplane mode, fleeing the state. And the body-worn camera footage, the police stop on April the 4th, that is very interesting footage. Now, the defence, Gregor's lawyer, wanted that entered into evidence, and I have to say that's a very bizarre call, and I'll tell you why. So that happened this week, and the footage was played. It was all a bit disorganised because it was something that was just sprung upon the court and the prosecution. They didn't have the transcript for it, and it's actually very difficult to listen to. And what you can see on screen is there's lots of police officers and lots of cars, and the sheriff's there too. And like I said, it's very difficult to hear the audio. So I'm going to share with you the things that for me I could hear that were audible and that jumped out to me as being significant. And you can make your own determination about what you see and what you hear. But firstly, I just want to make an observation about Gregor. He was calm throughout, and he was there in a black muscle vest. And let me tell you, he's a big guy. He's got big muscles, and he's a big bloke, and I would say very intimidating to a 6-year-old like Corey, who's tiny. Even though he said that Corey had to toughen up, that was a message he had sent to Brianna, and that he was fat, and that's why he was putting him on the treadmill. And Corey was neither of those things. So one of the first significant things that jumps out at me is at 20 minutes and 43, where you hear Gregor say, "I'm freaking out right now. There are so many police cars." Okay, so he's freaking out right now. Me, myself and I. He's not saying anything about Corey. This is about him and seeing so many police cars. And then he says, so I'm just going to give you the significant beats, and it's not all in order because some bits are just very difficult to even hear. So he said, I went to grad school and I was a maths teacher, so you know. So here he's giving his credentials, and it's not the only time that he does it. But what he's saying is, I'm someone who's educated, I'm somebody of value and of worth, and I'm smart. And he says it's been an interesting 2 years, to say the least. I mean, that's a very bizarre thing to say when your son is dead. He says, I haven't slept at all, as you can imagine. And then he says some other words, but everything going on, I'm a little freaked out. He's a little freaked out. What about his son? He talks about, well, he says, I play football, so, and then he starts talking about football and he's chatting sports, and it's, you know, the bro talk that he's hoping to bring those officers. They're all men standing around him, and it's difficult to say how many there are, but there's more than 6 officers there. There's at least 3 cars that I could see. And again, just another observation, a chest part of his shirt is ripped. I don't know how that happened, but just in terms of the way that he presents, he's very calm, but the shirt is ripped. And then he says, do you guys know if there's a warrant? So he's trying to ascertain why he's been stopped. He says, again, I'm a little freaked out, and he starts to scratch his armpits. Now that's probably an indication that he's nervous and sweating. Difficult to say though, but it's an odd gesture, but he's very calm. Like I said, no concern about Corey. No, well, he does mention something to do with Corey, and he starts talking about the stomach area, and he says something, and then he mumbles, and then he doesn't say anything for a while, and he scratches his head and he's ruffling his hair, and what he's doing there is buying time. And he says, he didn't have any bruising. I knew when he got home something was wrong, knew something wrong in my gut. Thought he needed sleep. I should have took him. Okay, then at 20, so he's trying to imply that when he came home he wasn't well. And then at 26:19 he says something which, I mean, I rewound it a number of times. She's a special kind of dirtbag. He's talking about Brianna here. the devaluing, the belittling and the misogyny. He's trying to say, hey, come on guys, you know the type of woman. And he's trying to get them hooked in, corralling them, just like Brian Laundrie did. This is what manipulators do. And then he switches gears and he says, I got my master's degree at Johns Hopkins, special education degree in mathematics. So again, he's trying to say, I'm the one that's valuable. I'm the one that's of worth, not her. This is all codified behaviour and language, but that's the message. He says, I regret ever leaving, and then one of the squad cars beeps, so it's difficult to know what he said, but I assume he's talking about leaving where he was doing his special education degree. And then he starts to chat about his brother in California, that he couldn't sleep, and driving on the 40. But the general round of everything that I heard and saw was it's all about Gregor, me, myself and I, and poor me syndrome. And then the darvoing, the discrediting of Brianna. But what I don't hear about is any care or compassion or empathy for sweet little Corey. Not one iota, not one scintilla, not one bit of concern. He's not upset in that video. He's calm and he's buying time and he's flipping the script. He's claiming the narrative, and his education and his credentials, they're really important to him. They're valuable to him. And I think he feels that he is much more valuable than Brianna, and that has worked for him before. So that's why it's significant that he returns to it a number of times, because at family court that worked for him. Talking to other members or people in authority, that has worked for him. It's probably the reason why so many professionals didn't believe what Brianna was saying, because he goes in with the devaluing. And then his father, David Gregor, who was a New Jersey state trooper for 27 years. Let's not forget about him. I listened to him and watch him testify. Clearly a well put together man, clearly a man who has authority and gravitas, and who was distraught and distressed about Corey. I saw genuine emotion. I have more to say about him, but I did observe genuine emotion about Corey. And what's interesting as well is he shared that he did not watch the treadmill abuse video because he said that he couldn't deal with seeing Corey being mistreated. Well, I think he should see it and see what his son did and what his son's capable of, and the mother, Carolyn. I really do. Why should they not see that when that's evidence of what Christopher Gregor did to Corey? There's no getting around that. That's what he did. Multiple times he picked up that sweet little boy and pushed him and forced him back onto that treadmill and watched him fall and smash his face on the treadmill and be swept off, and do that so many times because he's trying to get his father's approval, because that's what little boys do. That's what they do. So Gregor's behaviour at the hospital, him leaving the ER, him leaving the hospital, him leaving the state, the treadmill abuse video, all of what I've seen, the body cam footage, I see a highly functioning, extremely manipulative and controlling perpetrator who lacks any care or thought or compassion or any scintilla of empathy for little Corey. That's the omission. I look at what people do and what they say, but also what they don't say and what they don't do and what their actions reveal. And him devaluing Brianna but puffing himself up, talking about his credentials, as I said, that's what worked for him in the past, and that's why he clings to that strategy. So his post-offence behaviour, his pre-offence behaviour, the phone searches, the deleting of the messages, that points to his guilt. Who does that? The searches about murder and autopsies and how long for charges. It took some time for him to be arrested. And I really hope that the jury understand the significance of this evidence and the facts. I really do. Because the defence try and throw as much spaghetti at the wall, but the facts still remain. And it looks like, actually one more thing I should say that came up this week was that the prosecution or the lead prosecutor said that it had come into her possession a phone call of Gregor calling his mother and trying to coach her in terms of her testimony and trial strategy. And Carolyn, the mother, had said multiple times that she couldn't talk about it, and he persisted, so much so that she hung up. And Corey's grandfather, David Gregor, had to intervene as well and say the conversation is over. But the lead prosecutor made that clear to the judge, and Gregor's defence counsel, Mario Carlucci, had to concede and submit that it was a problem and that he did intend to call Carolyn, and of course she's a significant witness for him, and now he didn't think that he could call her because the prosecutor said she would cross-examine about that call and it shows consciousness of guilt. Again, trying to manipulate, trying to control the narrative and control other people's testimony. That's who Gregor is. He just wants to get off the hook. He does not care about Corey. That's what I observe. And it looks like he may well testify on Friday the 24th of May, along with Dr. Michael Baden. Yes, Dr. Michael Baden, you heard that accurately. And I'll be ready to hear their testimony. I'm working out of the US on the 24th. But if they both testify, I want to analyse what is said, and I'll share it with you. But so far, all I've seen from Gregor is his controlling and manipulative individual, and he's a pathological liar who cannot be trusted. Now go back to the facts and the evidence and justice for Corey. Until next time, be curious, ask questions, and always trust your instincts.